Just whoever has her, just come home. Just bring her home. I just don't know what else to say. Sorry.
Those words from a mother worried sick about her nearly 9-month pregnant daughter. Everyone in the community desperate to bring the 23-year-old woman home, safe and sound.
The people who are out there listening to this and have seen a very pregnant lady who fits the description of Theresa will contact the Ravenna police or the investigators.
The news of Theresa Andrews' disappearance spread like wildfire through the tight-knit community. And within hours, everyone was searching high and low for Theresa.
Going up and around the railroad tracks in specific areas, looking around and seeing if there might be, any evidence of, unfortunate, the worst case.
But days passed, and what happened to the young woman remained a mystery.
That's why it's imperative that we get any information from anybody to help us put this puzzle together.
The horrifying truth was a crime so unthinkable, worse than anyone in the small town could have ever imagined.
The method by which this was done is absolutely shocking. It does shock the conscience, I think, of everyone.
It was a case that made mothers hold their babies a little tighter and made pregnant women leery of leaving their homes.
It makes me feel very sad for that poor family. Just pray they'll be okay.
It didn't make any sense to her family. The soon-to-be mother vanishes without a trace, just days before her due date.
She didn't leave on her own free will. She didn't, because that's not like my daughter.
Theresa Andrews targeted by a woman so desperate for a child of her own, she was willing to do anything to get one.
This can't be happening right in front of my eyes. Like a horror movie.
A crime so horrific, it's still fresh in the minds of the reporters who covered it more than 20 years ago.
The picture of them running out of the house with that baby is, you just can't forget that. But it was a mystery.
I'm Kelly Kennedy, and you're listening to Dark Side of the Land. Theresa and her husband John had been married for a little over 4 years. Those who knew the couple said they couldn't be happier, and they were over the moon when they learned they were expecting their first child, a baby boy. Both Theresa and John were devout Jehovah's Witnesses and were very involved in their church. The couple bought a 2-story white house on West Riddle Avenue in Ravenna, a small city about 40 miles southeast of Cleveland. Everyone was excited to meet the newest addition to their family. Theresa's father, Jim Gerano, couldn't wait to become a grandfather. But on September 27th, 2000, all of their hopes and dreams came crashing down around them.
This is our first grandchild, so it's really tough.
That was the day that Theresa Andrews disappeared.
I'm living with the hope that somewhere my wife Theresa and our child are still alive and safe.
When Theresa's husband, 23-year-old Jonathan Andrews, came home from work that evening, both his pregnant wife and their 1999 Jeep Wrangler were gone.
My wife is due to deliver our child on Wednesday, October 4th.
When Jonathan got home, the front door was unlocked. Theresa's purse was sitting on the kitchen counter. Theresa also left home without her shoes. The only pair that fit her extremely swollen ankles were left in the hallway. A half-drank glass of orange juice was sitting on their living room end table, a plate and an empty fruit cup on the coffee table, and a pair of pajamas laying on the edge of the upstairs bathtub. Theresa had also left her cell phone and her purse behind, all things that Jonathan knew were completely out of character for his wife. But police couldn't find any signs of a break-in or a struggle inside the home.
They're looking at all kinds of theories. As a matter of fact, it's more of an inclusive rather than a exclusive view that the police are taking. They're open for everything. They're following up everything.
Jonathan said Theresa called him earlier that morning. She told him a woman called saying she worked in the Ravenna area and was interested in buying their 1999 Jeep. Jonathan warned his wife not to go on a test drive with anyone and to be very careful. She promised him she would. But a few hours passed and Jonathan never heard back from Theresa. So naturally, he started to worry. And when he came home, his worst fears were confirmed. His very pregnant wife was nowhere to be found. Detectives didn't waste any time getting Theresa Andrews' photo out to everyone. Before long, every local news station in the area was on the story.
One of the mysteries of this case, one that stands out, is how no one saw or heard anything around the time that Theresa disappeared from the home behind me.
Paul Orlowski was working for 19 News at the time of Theresa's disappearance. Back then, we were known as Home Team 19.
So, Paul, I know it's been nearly 23 years since this happened. So, as much as you can, take me back to that day when this news first broke, when you first found out this woman who was nearly 9 months pregnant was missing.
Yeah. Well, as you can see, I've made extensive notes. And I just did that for a joke, because you don't need notes on a story like this, because it just sticks with you, all the images.
Orlowski was one of the first reporters on the scene. At first, he wasn't sure what to think.
Obviously, as reporters, we do cover missing persons cases all the time. Fortunately, they don't usually end that tragically. When you first got assigned this story, do you remember what your sense was? Like, did you have a gut feeling she was going to be okay, or did you have kind of a bad feeling?
Well, somebody that far along in a pregnancy, I had a bad feeling no matter what. But I had wondered if maybe she had run away or something. I didn't know a lot about her that first night when we were down there.
Police quickly located the Andrews missing Jeep. It was parked in the North Portage County Administration parking lot, which is right behind the Andrews home. The doors were unlocked and there were no keys in the car. A baby seat was left in the back. Then investigators started digging into Theresa's phone records, hoping to find who called her to see the Jeep.
And then on October 2nd, the station had gone down there day after day after day. And that day, in the afternoon meeting, the news director was saying, "Well, should we go back down there again? Because, nothing's happening." We thought maybe she had run away, or we had no idea, other than it was mysterious.
But for whatever reason, Orlowski felt like a trip back to Portage County was the right call. And as it turns out, it definitely was.
We talked about it, and I said, if something happens, we're going to be in Cleveland, 45 minutes away. We'll never be able to recover if something happens. So we basically shot a story that day saying that not much was happening, and trying whatever new information that we wanted to get out there, and the police wanted us to get out there. And so we were getting ready to do this. We did a story at 6 o'clock, and we're in the parking lot of the police department, cameraman and I, and it was after dark. And I recall all of a sudden we saw a couple police cars leave, and then the highway patrol all of a sudden left. So then I don't remember, it was the sheriff or somebody, whoever was the last to leave, said, let's go follow them. And so we left the parking lot of the police department, and we followed, and we went down the street where Michelle Bika lived, and it was weird, it was eerie, because it backed up in all the driveways of the neighbors were police vehicles, lights off, no sirens or whatever. And then, so I said, we better get out of here, because something's going to happen. Something's about ready to happen. So we drove by the house, and we heard a gunshot.
And that's when the heinous truth about what really happened to Theresa Andrews slowly started to come out.
911, what's the emergency?
Oh my God, my wife shot herself!
What's going on?
My wife shot herself!
That gunshot was the sound of the Andrews neighbor, 39-year-old Michelle Bika, committing suicide.
As the police, I think, approached her home, it was clear that, that she was found out.
It's a scene that will be forever ingrained in Orlowski's memory. A firefighter, a father himself, walking out of that home holding a newborn baby. A miraculous rescue.
Camera guy got the only shot. Up here came one of the safety forces. I don't remember if it was a police or fireman. I believe fireman came running out with this little baby. And that was the child that became known as baby Oscar back then.
But when investigators suddenly shifted their attention to the garage, Orlowski's heart sank.
And then we see some excavation shovels and this and that, and that's when I really didn't know what to think. Because then you're like, but by now, it's probably 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that, and you're just thinking, no, it can't be. This is too macabre to be true. They can't be digging up a body. And indeed, they were digging up a body. So it's a hard story to forget.
After you heard the gunshot and you saw the baby, and then they started digging, when you realized what actually happened, like what was going through your head when you started to piece that together?
Disbelief. This can't be happening right in front of my eyes. Like a horror movie. The baby, that was 12 seconds maybe, and off the cruiser went with the child. But then this digging that went on for hours, and I don't remember what time I got home, but probably 4 or 5 in the morning. And then a morning crew came in a little bit early to relieve us. But it's just disbelief.
Yeah.
And I remember when I got home just kind of thinking, did I really just see what I saw? And I did.
So to recap the night, emergency workers hustled a newborn baby out of the Bika home. Then they brought out the body of a woman under a sheet who had shot herself as police approached. And finally, a second body, sadly belonging to Theresa Andrews. The shocking truth was that Michelle Bika was a woman who was so desperate to become a mother, she was willing to do anything to make her dream a reality, even if it meant committing murder.
I mean, it's sad that people have to go through this, the suffering. She was happy to be a mother. I was happy to be a mother. I know what it was like to carry a baby for 9 months and just be so excited. And now she can't be excited.
Once the truth of the baby-stealing murder plot was revealed, everyone was talking about it. The story made national headlines.
I'm a mother. I would kill for one of my children, and not knowing whether she was dead right before the baby was taken or whether she knew that woman was ripping her baby out of her body. That's had to be hard. I couldn't imagine that.
The next day, the need for information about the last seconds of Theresa Andrews' life was insatiable. It was difficult to even get your hands on a newspaper.
When it first came up and they found the Jeep, that's when I figured it had to be locally somewhere. It had to be. Then she had to turn up somewhere. I didn't think it would be that close, but...
Michelle Bika was ready to become a mother. She had the nursery all set up. She had thrown herself a baby shower. She even rented out a hall for a christening party. The only problem was Bika wasn't actually pregnant.
Well, there was obviously some misrepresentations going on by Michelle Bika as to her condition. Physically, she's a rather large woman.
That sinister day changed Ravenna forever.
From what I hear, the family is very respectable, and I go by this house probably 10, 12 times a day. I've never seen anything strange. I mean, it's just been very quiet. I am just totally shocked.
So how did police finally crack the case? Investigators were able to trace the phone call Theresa got back to the Bika's cell phone. I have the entire case file. Crime reports say that when officers showed up at the Bika's house, they were greeted by a woman with reddish hair who appeared visibly nervous. Michelle Bika claimed their cell phone had been recently stolen when her and her husband Thomas were at Walmart. While officers were questioning Michelle, her husband, Thomas Bika, came home. Officers were surprised when Michelle told them she had just given birth to a baby boy herself. She said her water broke in the mudroom. She called her OBGYN and he called an ambulance. She said by the time the ambulance got there, it was too late, and a paramedic helped her deliver the baby at home. Michelle said she was then taken to Akron General Hospital, but she claimed when she got there, there was a tuberculosis scare, so they sent her home. Bika's husband, Thomas, was a corrections officer at the time and was at work when all of this happened. Michelle claimed the hospital tried to call her husband at work, but they accidentally called the Summit County Sheriff's Department instead of the Portage County Sheriff's Department. Michelle says she called her husband once she got home and he rushed home. Thomas told officers there was something spilled all over the mudroom floor, but his wife told him that was where her water broke and she had the baby. Quite a story, but detectives weren't buying it. Phone records revealed that Michelle called her family doctor the day after Theresa Andrews went missing. But Michelle had an answer for that too, claiming her doctor's number was programmed, so whoever stole her phone must have dialed it. But the story got even flimsier when FBI agents tried to verify Michelle's story with the hospital. Turns out they had no record of Michelle ever being a patient there. Then officers tracked down Dr. Vernon Hirschberger, Bika's doctor. The doctor told them Michelle was his patient, but he hadn't seen her for about 13 years, at least until she called for an appointment for a checkup on a baby. The doctor said he had no idea Michelle was even pregnant, and he didn't provide any prenatal care for her. Michelle even went as far to forge doctor's notes for herself. In one instance, a note from another doctor, Dr. Richard Mitchell. The note claimed Michelle needed to be on bed rest. She also forged the same doctor's signature on Family Medical Leave Act paperwork for her husband's job. Dr. Mitchell said all of the documents were falsified, and he had only seen Michelle Bika once in 1999 to review the results of a pregnancy test.
I read that Bika went to a lot of extremes to make her pregnancy appear convincing.
Mm-hmm.
She even had a baby shower scheduled, a christening. I mean, really made everyone around her believe that she was truly pregnant. What did you learn about her? I read that she had like a criminal record.
Yeah, well, her husband, first of all, she was very heavy. She was a heavy woman, so could hide it. But her husband was a jail guard. I think at the county jail down there. And she was in jail for receiving stolen property, and that's where the two of them met. So this would be Michelle and Thomas, I think was his name.
Mm-hmm.
So they met there and hooked up eventually, I guess. And then there was this whole charade that you referred to. But she could hide it from the standpoint of being heavy and wearing maternity-type clothes, things like that.
It appears that once Michelle realized the jig was up, she decided a self-inflicted gunshot wound was her only escape.
As they approached the home and exited their police vehicles, they heard a shot. Shortly after the shot, they heard the cries of Mr. Bika stating over and over again his wife's name.
Michelle! Oh my God! Oh my God!
It seems like Michelle had everybody fooled, including her husband Thomas, a 41-year-old Portage County jail guard at the time. He married Michelle after meeting her when she was an inmate back in 1994. Court records show she was then Michelle Zonko, and she was found guilty of stealing several thousands of dollars from a company she worked for. Portage County prosecutor Victor Vigilucci saying they had no reason to believe that Thomas was in on it.
There was nothing at that time we felt that we could hold him on.
So police did initially arrest Thomas Bika, but ended up letting him go, saying they didn't have enough to hold him. They ended up saying he didn't have anything to do with it. Do you truly believe that the husband had no idea about any of this?
I'm trying to choose my words carefully. In abrupt terms, or I think it was kind of stupid. I don't know. You scratch your head. Come on.
Yeah, it's hard to believe, isn't it?
And I don't. If Mr. Bika's listening, I'm sorry, but it stretches the imagination. But I think they wouldn't let him go.
Mm-hmm.
In a case like this with such high profile,
Right.
nationwide headlines, they wouldn't have let him go if they had anything, any inkling.
I mean, yeah, and she just called him and said, like, I had the baby, but I'm already home from the hospital, like, within hours. Like, I just don't understand how someone could believe that,
Yeah.
but...
Exactly. Maybe just overjoyed to have a baby, but
Yeah.
no, even they rush people out of the hospitals, maternity wards these days, but not that fast.
I did reach out to Thomas Bika for an interview, but he told me he wants to leave that part of his life in the past. Investigators discovered Theresa Andrews' body in a shallow grave in a detached garage outside of the Bika's home. Police records showed that 2 days after Theresa's disappearance, Michelle had several tons of gravel delivered that she claimed was for the driveway.
Her body was without the child that we all knew she was carrying. An examination of the body at the scene made it obvious that an incision had been made upon her abdomen and the child removed.
The coroner said Theresa was likely shot with a .22 caliber handgun, the same gun Michelle used to kill herself. The bullet penetrated Theresa's lung and her heart.
If they did it after she was killed, it had to be done within 7 to 10 minutes. Otherwise, In 15 minutes, the baby's dead.
But how did poor Theresa Andrews become the unfortunate target of this insane murder scheme? Turns out it was all chance. The Bicas had bumped into the Andrews at a local Walmart a few weeks prior when they were shopping for baby clothes.
Michelle Bica had it figured out as far as she was due, I think, on the 4th or she was due within a week, for sure, within several days, I believe. So the baby was going to be full term. So it was a well-orchestrated plan. It didn't work in the end. But like you said, all of that preparation and the ruse of the showers and all that is just, I don't know, man's inhumanity to man.
Theresa and her husband were just at Walmart one day and they ran into the Bicas and they were talking about how they were both pregnant. So, I mean, it sounds like it could have been anybody. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, maybe stalking a victim. It's an evil plan. Yeah, and then the gunshot really, I said, oh boy, what's going on? Did they shoot somebody? Well, she shot herself when she saw them approaching the home.
Orlowski wasn't the only reporter impacted by this grisly crime. Days after the gruesome discovery, we spoke with some local newspaper reporters in Ravenna.
There are two families who are so greatly affected by this, and I just can't even imagine what this has been like for them. And so, as a reporter, it's just been very difficult.
It's unlike anything that I've covered in 10 years as a journalist, and I'm not sure what it is, but I was just telling my mother-in-law in Cleveland, I've never felt this way covering a story before.
Kenneth Kaufman was one of the Ravenna firefighters who was first on scene that night.
Being there on the scene and seeing it brings back flashbacks of bad memories every time I see the picture of the stethoscope with her smiling.
Baby Oscar was taken to the hospital until a DNA test could be done.
We're talking about the DNA results being available hopefully as early as tomorrow. The hospital is a very safe place for the child, and the family is okay with that at this time.
But finally, Oscar Gavin Andrews was reunited with his father, Jonathan, and the rest of the family. The baby was named Oscar, after Irish poet Oscar Wilde, a name Theresa always loved. Jonathan Andrews hasn't spoken publicly since the tragedy happened. I did talk with him briefly over the phone, but he told me it would be too tough to delve back into such a painful time. But the good news is baby Oscar, who is now not a baby at all, but 23 years old, is doing just fine. Jonathan has since gotten remarried and the family lives in Georgia. We did speak with Theresa's parents, Jim and Vicky Giorano, shortly after their daughter's emotional funeral.
The day yesterday was phenomenal. The outpouring of love and appreciation and concern for us by our worldwide brotherhood and the community.
I feel sorry for her, and I feel sorry for her husband, because all of us have lost here. There was a man who lost his wife, a man who thought he had a baby. We lost our daughter, but most importantly, our son-in-law lost his best friend.
I did reach out to Theresa's parents for an interview as well, but they weren't interested.
Have to relive it all over again? I don't think it wouldn't be a very easy thing to do, and I think other people would understand that.
As shocking as the crime was, Theresa's murder wasn't the only instance of cesarean kidnapping in America. Between 1983 and 2003, there were 4 documented cases. And since 2003, there have been 14 cases of cesarean kidnapping, as well as 4 attempted cases. One thing is for sure, this unconscionable crime won't be forgotten by anyone in Ravenna, including the first responders and the reporters who covered it.
And then this darkened street, that was the eerie feeling. That's the feel of what was going on there was not in any of the police reports, because all of a sudden there's probably 10, maybe more, police cars backed into driveways of the homes leading up to the Bica home. And it was eerily silent, and police with all their lights off, so getting ready for something. And that's when I said to the camera guy, we better get out of here, because we're in the middle of some, I used a word that I won't use, but we were in the middle of it. And so, but we didn't get that much farther when, bang, we heard the shot and pulled over and started running back toward, which you probably shouldn't have done, but right. Your instincts kick in. But just the eeriness of it and the immediate realization that something's not right.
I'm Kelly Kennedy, and this is Dark Side of the Land.
Subscribe now for future episodes and find more Dark Side of the Land and photo galleries related to these cases at cleveland19.com.